The fire was the heart of the clan. It lived in the center of the great cave, a breathing, crackling creature of orange and red that held the vast, pressing darkness at bay. It was warmth against the biting cold that seeped from the stone walls. It was light in a world of deep shadows. It was safety from the things that screeched and hunted in the long, terrifying nights. More than anything, the fire was the center of their world, the place where the people of the blue smoke were truly themselves. Around this heart, the clan was gathered. The day's hunt had been good a young, foolish boar that had wandered too close to their territory. The smell of roasting fat and meat, a scent of profound comfort and success, filled the cavern, mingling with the sharp, clean scent of the burning pine. Bellies were full. The gnawing hunger that was their constant companion had, for a time, retreated into the shadows with the night prowlers. This was the time for stories. The time when the deeds of the ancestors were brought back to life in the flickering firelight, when the wisdom of the clan was passed from the old to the young. Tonight was a special night. Ren, a boy of 15 winters, tall and wiry but with the nervous energy of a young colt, was to join the hunting party at dawn for the first time. He was no longer a child who chased hares with throwing sticks. He was to become a man who faced the tusk and the horn. He sat slightly apart from the other boys, his new spear a gift from his father, its flint point a perfect, lethal leaf of gray stone rusting across his knees. His knuckles were white where he gripped the shaft. Fear and excitement churned in his gut like a nest of snakes. Kale, the oldest of the clan, saw the boy's tension. Kale was a living relic, a man so old no one remembered a time when he was not the elder. His face was a map of the clan's history, a landscape of wrinkles deeper than any canyon they knew. His eyes, milky with age, seemed to hold the light of 1,000 fires. His voice, when he spoke, was like the slow grinding of stones, a sound that demanded silence and respect. He rose slowly, his ancient bones creaking a protest. He took a burning branch from the fire and held it aloft, its dancing light casting his immense, stooped shadow against the cave wall. All eyes turned to him. The low chatter of the clan died away, replaced by a respectful hush. "You sit with a man's spear, Ren," Kale's voice rumbled. "At dawn you will follow the hunters. You think you know what it is to hunt. You think it is about the sharpness of the point, the strength of your arm." He paused, letting his words settle. He looked at the faces of the young ones gathered near the fur-eat Ren's anxious eagerness. At Burrow's broad, confident smirk, a boy who thought his size was a substitute for wisdom. At Laya's wide, curious eyes, a young girl who already understood that the stories of the hunt were stories of life for everyone. "You know nothing," Kale continued, his voice dropping lower. "The spear is bone and stone. The arm is flesh. The hunt is a story. It begins in the mind, and it is paid for by the spirit. Tonight I will tell you of the first hunt. I will tell you of a time before we were the people of the blue smoke, when we were the people of the shadows, and the world belonged not to us, but to our fear." He settled himself back onto his furs, the branch resting beside him, its light a small, personal star. The cave grew still, the only sounds the crackle of the great fire and the elder's gravelly voice. "In that time," Kale began, his gaze turned inward, to a past so deep it was almost lost. "There was no hunt. There were no spears like the one you hold, Ren. There were clubs of wood and stones held in the hand. We did not stand tall. We crept. We hid. The great beasts, the deer with crowns of horns, the great tusked boar, the shaggy bison, they were gods. They were the spirits of the forest and the plain. We did not hunt them. We fled from them. We ate what they left behind. We were scavengers, followers of the wolf and the great cat. We would watch from the trees as they made a kill, and when they had eaten their fill and moved on, we would creep down like jackals and steal the scraps, the marrow from the cracked bones. Our bellies were never full. Hunger was the air we breathed. We were small, and the world was large and full of teeth. In those days, the leader of our ancestors was a man named Mal. He was not big, but his eyes saw more than other men's. He saw the way the wind bent the grass, the way a bird's cry could signal danger. He carried the clan's hunger on his shoulders, and it was a heavy weight. He had watched 2 children and an elder waste away in one winter, their spirits blown out like a weak flame in a strong wind. He knew that the path of the scavenger was a path to extinction. With Mal were 2 others. Gron, who was a giant among men, with the strength of a young bear. His mind was simple, and his answer to any problem was to hit it with his club. And there was Turok, who was small and quiet like Yu Ren. He was not strong, but his eyes were sharp, and his hands were clever. He could shape flint like no other, making the sharpest scrapers for the women and the keenest points for nothing yet. They were just sharp stones. Mal watched the wolves. He spent many days hidden on a high ridge, watching a wolf pack hunt the great deer. He saw that they did not simply run at the deer. They worked together. Some would show themselves, driving the deer in one direction. Others would lie in wait, hidden in the long grass. They used their minds. They had a plan. They were a clan like us, but they were a clan that ate well. "We are not wolves," Gron grumbled when Mal spoke of what he had seen. "We do not have their teeth or their speed. The great deer is a forest god. His horns can tear a man in 2. It is forbidden to even think of challenging him." Mal turned to Turok. "Your stones are sharp," he said. "Sharper than a wolf's tooth. But they are small. A man's hand cannot push it deep enough." Turok, who rarely spoke, looked at the long, straight branches they used as walking sticks. An idea flickered in his quiet mind. He took one of his sharpest flint points and a long stick. He used a strip of leather to try and tie the stone to the stick. It was clumsy. The stone wobbled. "It is a fool's tool," Gron laughed. But Mal saw the shape of the idea. For many days, the 3 of them worked. It was Mal's mind, Turok's hands, and Gron's strength coming together. Turok learned to shape the base of the flint point so it could be set into a notch at the end of the wood. Gron, with his great strength, brought them the straightest, strongest limbs of the ash tree. Turok showed them how to use the dried sinew from a rabbit, thin and strong, to bind the stone to the wood so tightly that they became one. They created the first spear. It was a terrifying object. It was longer than a man's arm, with a tooth of stone that promised to bite deep. It was a weapon born not of rage, but of desperation and thought. It was the physical shape of Mal's idea. They made 3, 1 for each of them. They practiced. They threw them at fallen logs. Gron, with his strength, could throw his spear hard enough to split the wood. Turok, with his sharp eyes, was the most accurate. Mal was the one who understood its true purpose. This was not a club to be swung. It was a fong to be delivered from a distance. It meant they could touch the beast without being touched. The time came. The hunger in the cave was a constant cry. Mal knew they could wait no longer. He chose to hunt the great deer, the stag with a crown of horns as wide as a man was tall. To hunt this beast was the greatest taboo. It was like challenging the mountain itself. But Mal knew that to kill their greatest fear would be to kill the hunger forever. The 3 of them left the cave at dawn. They did not tell the clan what they were doing. They carried their new spears and a silence heavy with purpose and terror. For 2 days they tracked the great stag. Turok, with his keen eyes, found the signs. A hoof print in the soft earth, a branch where the stag had rubbed the velvet from its new horns, a trail that was invisible to most but was a clear story to him. They found him on the morning of the 3rd day, in a clearing near a stream. He was more magnificent and terrifying than any story had described. His coat was the color of the deep forest, his neck thick with muscle. He held his great head high, his antlers a thicket of deadly points. He was drinking from the stream, calm and majestic. He was the king of this forest. And they, 3 small men with sharpened sticks, were there to kill him. Gron's knuckles were white on his spear. His instinct was to roar and charge. Mal put a hand on his arm. "Patience," he whispered. "Remember the wolves." They spent the rest of the day watching from a distance, hidden in the undergrowth. Mal studied the clearing, the way the trees grew, the paths the deer used. He was not just watching the prey, He was learning the land. The land he knew would be their greatest ally. He formulated his plan, a reflection of the wolf hunt he had seen. The clearing was bounded on one side by the stream, and on the other by a steep, rocky cliff. There were two main paths leading out. "Gron," Mal said in a low whisper, "you will go to the far end of the clearing, hidden. When the stag runs, you must be a wall of noise and fury. You must not let him pass. Turn him towards the cliff. Tarak," he continued, "you and I will show ourselves. We will drive him. When he is turned by Gron, he will be trapped between us and the cliff. We will have him." It was a simple plan, but it relied on courage, timing, and their new, untested weapons. They were filled with a cold dread. They were not just hunting a beast for its meat. They were committing a great sacrilege. They were challenging a god. As dusk began to settle, painting the sky in shades of orange and blood, they moved into position. Ren, can you imagine that feeling? To be so hungry that your stomach eats itself, to carry the hope of your entire people on the point of a spear, and to walk willingly towards the greatest fear you have ever known? That is the heart of the hunt. Not the kill, but that first step into the valley of fear. Mal and Tarak stepped into the clearing. The great stag saw them immediately. Its head shot up, water dripping from its muzzle. It snorted, a plume of steam in the cool air. It was not afraid. It was indignant. What were these two small, weak creatures doing in its domain? It stamped a hoof. It lowered its great head, the points of its antlers a promise of death. It was a challenge. Mal raised his spear. Tarak stood beside him, his own spear held ready. For a long moment the world stood still. There was only the clearing, the three of them, and the vast, silent judgment of the forest. Mal took a deep breath, and he let out a great cry, a sound that was both a hunter's call and a prayer. He and Tarak began to advance. Kale stopped. He leaned forward and picked up a piece of roasting boar, chewing it slowly, his old eyes looking into the heart of the fire. The young ones around him were utterly still, their own food forgotten. Burrow was no longer smirking. His mouth was slightly agape. Ren had forgotten the weight of his own spear. He was there in the clearing with Mal and Tarak, facing the forest god. "The story is not finished," Kale said, his voice a low growl. "But the fire needs wood. And you need to feel the chill of the night to understand what it is they were fighting for." He gestured to the pile of pine logs near the cave entrance. "Go, all of you. Bring more wood for the heart of the clan. Then I will tell you of the blood and the price." The young ones scrambled to obey. Ren, Burrow, and the others hurried to the mouth of the cave, the spell of the story momentarily broken by the elder's command. As they stepped outside the circle of firelight, the cold hit them like a physical blow. The wind, a keen and bitter knife, sliced through their fur wraps. The world beyond their cave was a vast, indifferent darkness, filled with unseen things and the immense, crushing silence of the night. They quickly gathered the logs, their arms full, and scurried back to the safety and warmth of the fire, their brief exposure to the outside world a stark reminder of the stakes of Kale's story. They piled the wood near the hearth, and the fire, fed a fresh log, leaped up with a roar, sending a shower of sparks towards the smoke-blackened roof of the cave. The young ones settled back into their places, their eyes fixed on the elder. Ren could feel his heart beating a little faster. He had felt the cold. He now understood, in a small way, the world before the successful hunt, a world where that cold was a constant presence, inside and out. Kale watched them, a flicker of satisfaction in his ancient eyes. He had made his point. He cleared his throat, and the sound of grinding stones once again filled the cavern. "So," he resumed, his voice drawing them back into the deep past, into the twilight clearing. The great stag lowered its head. Mal and Tarak advanced. They did not run. They walked, their spears held forward, a wall of two. The stag was not used to being challenged. It was used to fear. This lack of fear confused it, angered it. With a roar of fury, it charged. You have never seen such a thing. It was not like the charge of a boar, low to the ground. It was a flowing, bounding charge, a thing of power and grace. The earth trembled. Its antlers were a forest of spears coming towards them. Now! Mal screamed. He and Tarak did not meet the charge. That would have been death. As the stag closed in, they leaped apart, one to the left, one to the right. The great beast thundered between them, its passage a blur of brown fur and deadly bone. It stopped, turning with surprising quickness, ready to charge again. But now they were behind it, between it and the path it had come from. They had taken its ground. Confused and enraged, the stag snorted and looked for another escape. It saw the path at the far end of the clearing and bolted. This was what Mal had planned. It was running towards Gron's hiding place. As the stag neared the edge of the trees, Gron erupted from his cover. He was a terrifying sight. A great, hairy beast of a man, roaring and smashing his heavy club against a tree trunk. The sound was like a thunderclap. The stag, already panicked, shied away from the sudden violence. It reared, turned, and galloped in the only direction left to it towards the sheer rock face of the cliff. They had him. The trap was sprung. The stag realized its mistake too late. It slowed, pacing back and forth before the impassable wall of rock. It was cornered. Its eyes, wild with fear and rage, darted between Gron, who blocked one escape, and Mal and Tarak, who were now advancing slowly, blocking the other. "This is the moment," Mal breathed. "The moment the world changes. Aim for the heart, behind the shoulder. Throw together. For the clan." They stood their ground. The stag, its fear boiling over into pure aggression, chose its enemy. It lowered its head and charged at Mal. Mal held his ground. Tarak, a few paces to his side, took a deep breath, raised his spear and threw. His aim was true. The spear flew like a striking bird and buried its flint head deep in the stag's flank. It was a painful wound, but not a fatal one. It was, however, enough to make the great beast flinch. That slight, momentary hesitation saved Mal's life. As the stag's horns swept past, aimed for his chest, Mal thrust his own spear with all the strength in his body. He drove it deep into the stag's thick neck. The beast screamed, a sound of agony that echoed through the forest. It thrashed its great head wildly, and the shaft of Mal's spear, caught in its antlers, snapped. Mal was thrown backwards, landing hard on the rocky ground. He was disarmed. The stag was grievously wounded, but its fury gave it a final, terrible strength. It turned its attention to Tarak, who was fumbling to retrieve another spear he had brought. Charged him. Tarak would not have time. It was Gron who saved him. With a roar that matched the stag's, he charged from the side. He did not throw his spear. He held it like a great lance, his momentum and his immense weight behind it. He crashed into the wounded stag, driving his spear deep into its ribs. The impact was catastrophic for both of them. The stag stumbled, its legs buckling. But in its death throes, it swung its massive head one last time. The tip of a great horn caught Gron in the thigh, tearing through fur and flesh and muscle, lifting him from his feet and tossing him aside like a broken doll. The great stag took 2 more shuddering steps, then fell to its knees. A great sigh, a final breath of life, escaped its lungs, and it collapsed onto its side, its magnificent crown of horns resting on the trampled earth. It was done. The forest god was dead. Silence fell over the clearing, a silence broken only by Gron's terrible, agonized cries. Mal, his head ringing, scrambled to his feet. He saw the dead stag, a mountain of meat and hide that promised life for his people. Then he saw Gron, lying in a pool of his own blood, clutching his mangled leg. Tarak was frozen, his face pale with shock, staring at the carnage. In that moment, Mal understood the full meaning of the hunt. Victory and tragedy were 2 sides of the same stone. To take a life, even to save your own, came with a price. He went to Gron, who was thrashing in agony. The wound was deep, a gaping tear from which his life was pouring out. Mal knew that Gron would not survive the journey back to the cave. He knelt beside the giant, a man who had been his friend, who had just saved Turok's life with his own. He placed a hand on Gron's shoulder. "You have fed the clan, my brother," Mal said, his voice thick with grief. "Your strength will be a story told forever." Gron's eyes, full of pain, looked at him. "Tell them I was not afraid," he gasped, and then his spirit left his body. They had won, and they had lost. Mal and Turok spent the night in that clearing, a night of mingled triumph and sorrow. They did not have the strength to begin butchering the stag. They built a small fire, and as they sat in its meager light, they looked at the great, still form of the deer and the small, still form of their friend. They understood that the meat they had won was now sacred, paid for with the blood of a hunter. The next day they did the work. They used Turok's sharp flint tools to skin the beast and cut away the meat. The richness of it, the sheer amount of it, was beyond anything they had ever known. They packed the best of it in the hide. But they could not carry it all. And they could not carry Gron. They buried him there, in the clearing where he had fallen, and they built a cairn of stones over his grave, so the wolves could not get to him. Before they left, Mal took up Gron's spear. "We will carry his spirit with us," he said. The journey back was long and slow, their hearts as heavy as the meat on their backs. When they appeared at the mouth of the cave, bearing such a wealth of food as had never been seen, a great cry went up from the clan. But the joy died when they saw that only two had returned. That night, they had the first feast of the hunted meat. Mal cooked it over the fire, and the smell brought tears to the people's eyes. But before anyone ate, he stood and told the story of the hunt. He told them of their fear, of the plan, of the courage of Turok, and of the final, brave sacrifice of Gron. He held up a piece of the roasted meat. "This is the gift of the stag," he said. "But it is also the gift of Gron. We will eat it and take his strength into us. We will honor the spirit of the beast we have killed, for it gives us life. And we will honor the spirit of the hunter we have lost, for he paid the price for it. This is the law of the first hunt. This is our way now and forever." "And so," Kale finished, his voice growing soft, "that is how we became hunters. That is how we stepped out of the shadows." Mal became the first leader who was also a storyteller, for he understood that the story of the hunt was as important as the meat. Turok became the next hunt leader, teaching the young to be clever and patient. And the spirit of Gron, his strength and his bravery, became the rock on which our clan's courage is built. Kale fell silent. The fire had burned down to a deep, glowing bed of embers. The entire cave was quiet, the weight of the story settling over them. Run looked down at the spear in his hands. It was no longer just a tool of wood and stone. It was a legacy. It was the courage of Gron, the mind of Mal, the skill of Turok. He understood now. Bravery was not the absence of fear. It was acting in the face of it, for the good of the clan. Survival was not just about finding food. It was about community, about sacrifice, and about remembering the price that had been paid. Burrow was no longer smirking. His face was thoughtful. He was looking at his own spear with a new respect. He had wanted to be Gron, the strong one. Now he understood that Gron's true strength was not in his charge, but in his willingness to protect his brother Hunter. Kale's ancient eyes found Ren's in the dim light. "The story is now in you, boy," he said softly. "Tomorrow you will not just carry a spear. You will carry the spirits of Mal, Turok, and Gron. You will hunt not for glory, but for the fire, for the heart of the clan. You will be afraid, and that is good. It means you understand the price. Now sleep. Your own story begins at dawn." Ren lay down in his furs, the spear beside him. The fire was a warm, glowing comfort in the heart of the cave. He closed his eyes, but he did not sleep for a long time. He saw the great stag in the twilight clearing. He heard Gron's final roar, and he felt the immense, silent weight of Mal's decision. He was ready. The fear was still there, a cold stone in his belly, but it was no longer a thing to be ashamed of. It was a part of the hunt. It was the feeling of being alive and on the cusp of becoming a man. The story of the first hunt was over, but his own was just beginning.